Every night at 1:11, the loneliest monster in New York called just to hear if my voice still existed in the dark. He told me once that men feared him more when he was silent, but he feared himself most when he was alone. Then he saw my face, and the name I had buried for 12 years rose between us like a gunshot. Because I was not just the woman he had fallen for over an encrypted line. I was the daughter of the one man his family had sworn to erase. Before Matteo De Luca ever touched my hand, before he said my name like it was something he had no right to want, before he learned what blood I came from, I was only Anchor 9 at Nocturne. An invitation only after-hour service for people too rich, too powerful, or too dangerous to be honest in daylight. Men paid obscene money for one thing there was no app for anymore: a human voice that would not judge them, expose them, or ask what their secrets were worth. We were trained to sound warm without sounding curious, calm without sounding intimate, present without ever becoming real. No surnames, no personal history, no follow-up contact, no exceptions. The rule I broke first was the smallest one. I remembered him. His code name appeared on my screen for the first time on a wet November night while rain dragged itself down the windows of the 31st floor like the city was trying to eavesdrop. Il Corvo, the Raven, tear black, no voice distortion. No emotional category selected, no advance notes. Just a direct line opening at 1:11 a.m. with the kind of clearance that made supervisors stand straighter without admitting why. I should have let it ring out. Instead, I adjusted my headset and gave him the line I had given senators, oil heirs, actors, and one tech billionaire who cried every Thursday because no one in his life had ever told him no. Nocturne, you're through. Take your time. For 2 seconds. There was only breathing. Controlled, male. Not drunk, not frantic, worse, deliberate. Then he said, "Tell me whether mercy is a form of weakness, or whether weak men only call it mercy after they've run out of nerve." There were voices behind him, but distant. Heavy shoes on stone. A door shutting. Somebody saying, "Boss," under their breath, not loud, careful. I kept my hand off the alert key. No one asks that question, I said. Unless they already know cruelty is easier. Silence, not empty silence. Dangerous silence. The kind that feels like a knife laid flat on a table while somebody decides whether to pick it up. And which one do you think I prefer? He asked. I stared at the rain beyond the glass. Somewhere across Brooklyn, Lucy would be asleep with her lamp still on and her math book open on her chest, because she believed refusing to fully unpack was different from being afraid. Our apartment lease was fake. Our names were not the ones we were born with. And the emergency cash taped behind my bathroom vent would not last another month. I had spent most of my life learning which questions were traps. This one was simple. If you preferred cruelty, I said softly, you wouldn't be asking a stranger to make it sound necessary. A chair scraped hard enough that I heard it through the line. Then a low laugh, brief and humorless. You're either very smart or very careless. Those are not opposites, for the first time. His amusement sounded real, tired, sharp around the edges. But real? What do they call you there? Nocturne doesn't do names. Then I'll call you Vesper, he said. You sound like the hour just before a church decides whether to ring. I nearly ended the call for that alone. We were not supposed to let clients nickname us. We were not supposed to allow anything that might survive disconnection. But something in the way he said it made me feel as if he had not named me to possess me. Only to prove that he had heard me. Why did you really call? I asked. A long exhale crossed the line. Because 6 men are waiting downstairs for me to choose which one betrayed me. And you thought a woman with a headset would enjoy that problem? No, he said. I thought a woman who sounds like she has survived worse than fear might know whether betrayal deserves death every time. That should have frightened me more than it did. What frightened me instead was the instant recognition in my own chest. Men like him did not ask because they wanted answers. They asked because they were looking for permission to remain human. So I gave him none. Not every betrayal is treason, I said. Sometimes it's panic wearing a bad excuse. And if panic gets people killed, then kill the lie, I said. Not just the liar. He went quiet again. somewhere behind him. A man cleared his throat. A second later, I heard the rustle of expensive fabric and a voice, closer to the receiver now, saying, "Get them out of my house, all of them. I'll decide tomorrow." When he came back on the line, his voice was lower, more private. "You've just made 6 very nervous men grateful to someone they'll never meet. That sounds safer for everyone. Nothing about this feels safe," he said. The call lasted 11 minutes. He gave me nothing I could report except insomnia, leadership strain, and a tendency to speak like he had never lost an argument long enough to trust one. When the line died, my reflection looked back at me from the dark monitor. Brown hair pinned up too tightly, mouth painted with the kind of lipstick women wear when they want to look more expensive than they are. A scar hidden under my left temple where the hairline fell just right. And eyes that still, even after all these years, searched every room for exits before anything else. At 8:03 the next morning, Lucy was waiting at our kitchen counter in Queens wearing one of my sweaters over her school uniform and eating cereal from a mug because we only had 2 clean bowls and one of them held loose cash. "You're staring at the toaster like it insulted your family," she said. "It did," I said. "Burn the bread. Maybe it knows your real personality." Lucy was 15 and too perceptive to be safe. She had my mother's dark brows, my father's stubborn mouth, and the alarming habit of saying devastating things like they were weather updates. She also had exactly one friend, a violin she refused to sell, and no idea that the name on her school records was as false as the one printed on my pay stubs. "Rent's due Friday," I said. She kept eating. "You say that every Tuesday like it changes the rent. We may have to move again." That got her attention. Her spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "No, it's not decided." "No," she said again, sharper now. I just started not being the weird new girl. I looked away first. She knew moving. She did not know why. She knew our father was dead. She did not know the version of him the city remembered. She knew we were careful. She did not know careful had once been the only reason we stayed alive. I crossed the kitchen and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm handling it." Her expression softened in the way that always made me feel guilty. Because children are not supposed to sound relieved when adults lie to them well. "You always say that. And I'm still here." "So am I," she said quietly. Which was her way of reminding me that survival did not count as stability. That night Il Corvo called again, and the night after that. Always 111, always my line. Sometimes he came to me carrying anger like a concealed weapon. Sometimes with nothing but silence and the sound of ice touching crystal somewhere near his hand, once faintly. I heard opera in the background and the low murmur of men who understood they were in the presence of someone who did not need volume to command a room. He never gave me his real name, I never asked, but across 2 weeks, I learned things men in his world would deny under oath and gunfire. He hated therapists because in his life, anxiety was treated as evidence of disloyalty. He slept in fragments. He distrusted compliments. He knew exactly how many capos still used the old Sicilian forms of address and which ones had started sounding too American when they lied. He did not drink to forget. He drank to slow down enough that he would not hear every betrayal twice. And he listened to me with the kind of concentration most people reserve for prayers or bomb threats. "You sound young," he said one night. "You sound tired." That was not the question. It was the better answer. A pause then. "Were you always this difficult?" "No, I worked at it." His laugh slipped through before he could stop it. "There you are. What does that mean?" "The part of you that appears right before you say something honest. I should have been more careful after that. Instead, I made the mistake of becoming curious about him in return. Nocturne was not supposed to feel like a ritual, but that is what our calls became. I learned the small timing of his breathing when he was containing rage. He learned that if I answered too quickly, I had been waiting. Once he asked what I did during the day. I told him I bought groceries and lied for a living. He said those sounded like the same skill at different price points. Once, after a long silence, he asked, "Do you have family?" The question moved through me like cold water. Yes? Close?
Close enough that I keep choosing them. When he spoke again.
His voice had changed, softer, but not weak.
That sounds expensive. You have no idea. No, he said.
I think I do. That was when I understood the most dangerous thing about him.
Not that he could hurt people. Men like him were never rare in New York. It was that he was trying, badly and in secret,
not to become only the thing the world feared most in him. And because I knew something about living inside a name you did not choose, I answered when I should have disconnected. The breach happened on a Thursday. Nocturne called it a metadata event,
which was rich people language for panic. 3 upper-tier client shells had been touched by an outside party.
No identities confirmed leaked, no active recordings compromised. But verification protocols were being initiated.
Operators were reassigned. Security doubled. Phones surrendered.
Every booth suddenly felt less like privacy and more like a glass coffin. My supervisor, Mira,
stopped outside my station with a tablet in one hand and the expression of a woman who had just learned her paycheck might not be worth dying for. Anchor 9, your black client has requested continuity verification in person. I stared at her. No. It was not phrased as a question. I don't do in person. 9. No one does in person. That's why it's called emergency protocol. My mouth had gone dry. Reassign me. He refused every substitute. Her eyes flicked over my shoulder to make sure no one else was near. Whoever he is, he made it very clear that if he walks into a room expecting your voice and hears another woman's,
our founder is going to need a new building. I thought of Lucy at home doing algebra badly and pretending not to listen for my keys after midnight. I thought of the landlord's final notice tucked inside the cookbook we did not use. I thought of how many lies one life can survive before it starts cracking at the seams. What's the location?
I asked. The drive downtown was in a black sedan with interior lights dimmed like discretion could be engineered.
My pulse had been wrong since we left Midtown, too fast, too sharp.
I told myself it was because in 12 years of running,
I had never once voluntarily walked into a room with a man who might know the name Serafina Carbone. The secure suite was on the top floor of a private club overlooking the East River. All dark wood, hidden scanners and silence so expensive it felt rehearsed. A woman in charcoal led me to a door, told me where to stand, what phrase to say, and not to move unless instructed. I nodded as if my knees had not already begun considering betrayal. Then the door opened. He was standing beside the windows with the river lights behind him, one hand in his pocket, the other resting lightly on the back of a chair he looked too composed to need. Tall, dark suit, no tie. Black hair swept back from a face that would have been beautiful if it had not been made to survive disappointment first. There was nothing theatrical about him. No rings kissed with skulls.
No vulgar display of power that made him worse. Men who need witnesses wear their threat loudly.
Men like him do not. 2 others were in the room.
A scar-faced right hand near the wall, a silver-haired man with a tablet at a side console. Neither mattered after the first second. Matteo DeLuca looked at me like he had just realized the ghost in his ear had a pulse.
I knew his name before anyone said it. Everybody in New York knew it.
Even if they pretended otherwise, DeLuca, the son who had inherited half a war and turned the other half into business.
The man whispered about in court hallways, in back rooms, in stories told badly by men who wanted to borrow danger from his reputation.
The man I had spent 2 weeks telling the truth to after midnight. I forgot the script. He did not. Say hello, he said. Just that quietly.
As if his entire certainty depended on whether my voice matched my face.
Every instinct in me screamed to run. Instead I heard myself say, Nocturne continuity verification, Anchor 9. His jaw tightened. Say hello, he said again, and this time it was not an order. It was disbelief trying not to become hunger. I swallowed. Hello. Il Corvo. Something in him broke open so briefly I almost convinced myself I imagined it. Vesper, he said. The scar-faced man looked between us.
Suddenly alert in a different way.
Matteo lifted one finger without looking at him. The man went still.
I had seen that kind of obedience only twice before in my life. Once in a church.
Once in my father's office before the world learned his name with disgust. This meeting is for verification only, I said. Because professionalism was the only shield I still had, Mateo took one step closer. You are younger than I thought. You are more dangerous than I hoped. One corner of his mouth moved. That is probably fair. The silver-haired man cleared his throat to remind us he existed. Mateo ignored him. His attention stayed on me with unnerving steadiness. As if he was still fitting my voice inside the outline of my face. If he noticed the tremor in my left hand. He gave me the gift of pretending not to. Then the lights cut out. Not fully. Just one violent blink, white to black to emergency amber. The silver-haired man swore. The scar-faced one reached under his jacket. Mateo moved before the sound finished forming, stepping between me and the door just as gunfire shattered the glass panel beside it. The room exploded. I dropped hard behind the overturned chair. The air full of screaming alarms and powdered safety glass. Men were shouting in the hallway. Someone hit the floor. Another burst of fire cracked from the side entrance. Mateo was above me for half a second, one arm braced against the wall. His body a shield he had no reason to offer. Stay down, he snapped. I would have. Except I saw something in the reflection of the black window frame. A fourth man slipping low behind the scar-faced guard. Moving where nobody was looking because everybody trusted the obvious threat first. Behind you! I shouted. The scar-faced man turned in time. Mateo did the rest. It lasted maybe 20 seconds. Terror stretches time badly. By the end of it, one attacker was bleeding into the carpet, another was moaning against the far wall. And the third had been disarmed by the simple mistake of assuming a woman on the floor would stay ornamental. I had used the brass base of a floor lamp on his hand with more panic than technique. His knife skidded away. Mateo finished the encounter before I could breathe again. Then came silence, fast, ragged breathing, sirens far below. My own pulse trying to leave through my throat. Mateo turned to me immediately. Are you hit? No, he crouched in front of me anyway, scanning my face, my shoulders. The blood on my sleeve that was not mine. That is not the same as not being hurt. I'm fine. His gaze held mine a second too long. You lie more politely than most people. The silver-haired man was clutching his upper arm now. Blood spreading fast through his cuff. I moved before anybody else did. Pressure, I said, dropping beside him. Higher, no, not there. The scar-faced guard obeyed me with obvious reluctance and excellent timing. Mateo stayed kneeling near enough that I could feel his attention like heat. You know trauma care? I know what hospitals smell like when people are trying not to panic. I pressed my scarf into the wound harder. The man gasped. Look at me, I told him. If you faint before I allow it, I'm going to be offended. A startled laugh escaped the scar-faced guard before he killed it. Mateo did not laugh. He was looking at me as if something had shifted beneath his feet and he disliked not knowing, whether it was the floor or his own judgment. By the time his private security flooded the suite, the ambush had already failed. He wrapped my coat around my shoulders himself. Too careful. That was somehow worse than roughness would have been. You're coming with me, he said. No. He blinked once. Perhaps not used to hearing the word from women he had just shielded with his body. Your line was compromised, he said. You were targeted in a room no one should have known you entered. That is not a coincidence. I still said no. Do you have family at home? My throat locked. He saw it. Of course he saw it. I'm going home, I said. Then you're not going alone. The ride to Queens took 2 SUVs and a silence so full it felt indecent. Mateo sat opposite me, elbows on his knees. Blood on one cuff that he either had not noticed or did not respect enough to care about. The scar-faced guard, whose name I later learned was Luca, spent most of the drive on the phone in low Sicilian-flavored English that made my skin crawl with old memory. When we stopped across from my building, Mateo looked up at the third-floor window where Lucy's lamp still burned behind cheap curtains. You have someone up there, he said. That was never your business. No, he agreed. It became my responsibility the moment somebody fired through glass to reach you. I hated how much those words steadied me.
Lucy opened the apartment door before I reached it. You're late, and there are men in suits in the hallway. So either you got promoted or assassinated? Then she saw Mateo behind me and froze in a way that had nothing to do with his suit. Something much older crossed her face. Recognition not of the man, but of the kind of danger he belonged to. Her eyes went to me. A question. A fear. Inside, I said. Mateo did not come in until I allowed it. That should not have mattered. It did.
Lucy stood with her arms folded while he remained near the door like a man trying very hard not to terrify. A child already making connections she did not deserve to make. Her gaze moved over him once, cool and assessing.
Are you the reason my sister looks like she wants to break a lamp over someone's head? No, Mateo said. That happened before me. I almost laughed despite myself. Lucy did not, but her mouth twitched, traitorously. That should have been the strange part. It wasn't. The strange part came the next morning when Luca called Mateo from the hall and said 4 words that turned the air to stone. We ran her face. I looked up too fast. Mateo's expression did not change immediately. Which was how I knew it was bad. Luca was holding a thin tablet now. Grim in the way men get when information starts smelling like old blood. There's a partial match from archived federal materials. Old witness-adjacent surveillance, different hair, younger. But it's her. Mateo's eyes came back to me. Colder now, not cruel, worse, wounded by the possibility of having been made a fool. Leave us, he said. Lucy started to protest. I stopped her with one look. When the apartment finally emptied, Mateo set the tablet face up on our kitchen table between the rent notice and a bruised apple. The photograph was grainy, older, me at 14. Getting into the back seat of a government sedan with my father's hand pressed to my shoulder. On the image, the original caption had not been fully scrubbed. Serafina Carbone. For one moment, nobody spoke. Then Mateo said, very quietly, "Tell me why the daughter of Lorenzo Carbone has been answering my private line under a false name." The room lost temperature. Lorenzo Carbone, my father, once consigliere to Mateo's father. Later the traitor, the rat, the ghost whose disappearance had fed headlines and bullets in equal measure. The man history said sold out the De Luca family to save himself. The man who died before he ever explained what really happened. I should have lied. It had kept us alive this long. Instead, I looked at the old photo and felt 12 years of running catch up to me all at once. Because the daughter of Lorenzo Carbone does not get to rent apartments, enroll little sisters in school, or sleep very long if anybody knows she's alive. Mateo's jaw hardened. You knew who I was. Not at first, but later. Yes. And you kept answering. I laughed once. Because the alternative was crying and I did not trust myself to stop. You called at 111 every night sounding like you wanted one honest thing in a life full of armed men. I made a terrible decision. His eyes flashed. That's one way to describe it. You think I was spying on you? What would you think? He asked, and that hurt precisely because he had a right to ask it. Lucy stepped out of the bedroom before I could stop her. She would have left if she wanted to hurt you, she said. We've been leaving things our whole lives. Mateo looked at her, startled by the interruption, then back at me. Whole lives? There was no elegant version of the truth, so I gave him the ugly one. My father did not disappear because he wanted witness money, I said. He took something from your house the night your father was arrested. Something he believed would get both his daughters killed if the wrong man found it. He told me to run if anyone ever used our real name after dark. 3 days later, he was dead. The feds buried the case because half the evidence chain vanished. We spent 12 years moving every time somebody looked at us too closely. So, no, Mateo, I did not answer your calls because I wanted access. I answered them because I forgot, for exactly 11 minutes the first night, what it felt like to be afraid of your surname. He stared at me. Then at Lucy, who was trying very hard not to look 15. Then back at the photograph. What did he take? He asked. I crossed the kitchen, reached behind the loose panel under the sink.
and pulled out the one thing I had never left behind in any apartment. A small black cassette recorder, old enough to look harmless and too old for anyone young to notice. My father left this in the trunk of a car the marshals never searched, I said. He also left instructions not to play it unless a DeLuca found us first. Matteo did not move. Play it, he said. My hands shook only once. The recording began with static, then my father's voice. Older than I remembered and more tired than a child can recognize in time. If you are hearing this, he said, then either I failed, or Matteo DeLuca has become old enough to deserve the truth. Matteo went still as stone. Your father did not fall because of the feds, the recording continued. He fell because his brother sold him before I ever opened my mouth. Vittori made the arrangement with the prosecutor's conduit, then told me to alter the book so the federal seizure would bury the trail. When I refused, he said your father had already become sentimental. Said the future belonged to men willing to kill family before family killed them. I took the ledgers, I took the names. And I ran because I had daughters, and because if Matteo lived, one day he might need to know the Wolf in his house was not outside the door. The tape clicked into static again. Lucy had stopped breathing. I think I had too. Matteo's face changed slowly, and somehow that was more terrible than if he had broken all at once. First disbelief, then fury, then something more intimate and devastating than either. A man realizing the hatred that had shaped his adulthood had been pointed in the wrong direction by blood. Vittori, he said, not loudly. That was what made it frightening. Vittori, his uncle, his underboss, the man I realized in a sick rush, who had been standing closest to him for years. Lucy spoke first. That sounds bad. I covered my mouth. Matteo almost smiled, but pain killed it before it lived. Where are the ledgers? He asked. I don't know. His eyes lifted. My father left only one more clue, I said. He said if church bells ever sound wrong, listen for what they're hiding. Matteo stared at me for 2 seconds. Then comprehension flashed hard enough to make him look suddenly younger and much more dangerous. St. Bartholomew, he said. I knew the name. An abandoned church in Red Hook, once used for family funerals before respectability moved uptown. Bells removed after a fire, tower sealed. One of the last places my father would have known from the inside. At that exact moment, Luca's phone rang in the hallway. He answered, went white, then stepped back into the kitchen. Boss, he said, the girls' school called. Lucy was never checked into first period. Every part of me went cold. Lucy was beside me safe. I looked at Luca. What? He was already correcting himself. Not school. The driver on the corner we placed for observation. Another girl, similar coat. Our mistake. Relief hit so fast it hurt. Then Matteo's phone lit up. One message, unknown number. Bring the tape to St. Bartholomew. Come alone if you want the real ledgers. Bring the Carbone girl if you want proof. Matteo showed it to me without a word. I should have told him no. I should have begged him to burn the tape and move Lucy out of the country by sunrise. Instead, I heard my father's voice in the static again. If Matteo lived, one day he might need to know. I'm coming. I said, no, that was quick. This is not a debate. It became one when your uncle demanded me by bloodline. His expression hardened. And if he wants you dead? Then he already did 12 years ago, I said. At least tonight I get to see his face. St. Bartholomew smelled like rain. Ash, an old stone pretending not to remember prayer. The bell tower stood black against the harbor. Its windows punched out years ago. Its doors chained and recently cut. Matteo's men surrounded the block unseen. Luca hated the plan with admirable sincerity. Matteo hated it more quietly, which meant more, inside the nave. Candlelight burned where there should have been none. Vittori DeLuca stood at the altar like blasphemy dressed for dinner. He was older than Matteo by 20 years, and had the polished weariness of a man who thought patience made him wise when really it had only made him dangerous. 2 soldiers flanked him. Between them sat a metal case on the front pew. His gaze found me first. Serafina Carbone. Your father had better cheekbones.
Matteo stepped slightly in front of me.
You always did enjoy proving your own guilt with style. Vittori sighed. Matteo, if you were going to turn sentimental over a voice girl,
You could at least have chosen one without archival complications. I felt Matteo's anger sharpen beside me.
you sold my father. I saved the family. Vittori corrected.
Your father still believed honor and business were allowed to share a room.
They aren't.
Lorenzo understood that too late.
You should be thanking me. I made you. No, Matteo said. You made a vacancy. Vittori's smile thinned. And filled it beautifully. The thing about evil men is that they often mistake intimacy for immunity.
Vittori kept talking because he still believed history belonged to whoever had survived it longest.
He admitted the altered books. The federal conduit. The night Lorenzo ran. The order to clean up my family when the first team failed and the marshals got there early.
He even admitted Nocturne had been touched by his own people to flush out the tape once rumors surfaced that
Matteo's mysterious after-hours fixation might lead him somewhere useful. I watched Matteo listen to the ruin of his own inheritance in real time.
Then Vittori made his mistake. He looked at me and said, I would have let the younger sister disappear quietly if you'd surrendered the recording sooner. Matteo changed. Not theatrically, not with shouting. Something simpler and colder. The last restraint leaving his face. But before he moved, I heard it. A metallic rattle above us. Not from the altar, from the tower, church bells ever sound wrong.
Listen for what they're hiding.
Up there, I said.
Vittori's eyes flicked upward on instinct. That was all Luca needed.
He and the others came through the transept like dark weather.
Gunfire cracked once, twice, then confusion swallowed the church whole. Matteo shoved me behind the stone baptismal font just as one of Vittori's men fired wild toward the pews. I hit the floor hard enough to bruise. By the time I pushed up again, Luca had one soldier bleeding into the aisle, another pinned near the side chapel. And Vittori was halfway to the stairs leading to the bell tower with the metal case abandoned behind him.
Matteo went after him. I did too, because I've never once in my life had the good sense to remain where men tell me it is safe. The tower steps were narrow, dust-thick, spiraling into dark. I heard them before I saw them, heavy shoes, a grunt. Stone scraping fabric, then voices above.
You should have stayed a child.
Vittori spat.
You should have stayed an uncle, Matteo answered.
By the time I reached the top landing, they were locked in the kind of brutal,
graceless fight only family can make look personal.
Vittori had age and desperation.
Matteo had every buried year of grief pointed in one direction at last.
Then Vittori saw me. It happened in one terrible second. His hand went for the pistol on the floor. Not at Matteo, at me. Matteo moved first.
The shot cracked against the tower walls like thunder trapped in stone. Vittori staggered, looked almost offended, then collapsed against the rusted frame of the dead bells his own lies had hidden for 12 years.
For a long moment, nobody moved. Rain came through the broken tower window in cold diagonal lines. Below us, sirens were finally nearing.
Matteo stood with the gun lowered, breathing hard, staring at the man who had raised him halfway and ruined him the rest of the way.
I stepped closer to the bells, inside the largest one. Wedged behind the rusted yoke exactly where my father would have trusted metal over men,
was a sealed packet of ledgers wrapped in oilcloth and tape blackened by time.
I laughed once, not because anything was funny.
Because some grief arrives so precisely it sounds like disbelief. Matteo looked at the packet in my hands, then at me. Your father told the truth, he said. He died trying to. His gaze moved over my face with unbearable care.
And I almost punished you for it.
Yes, I said. Because there was no kindness left in me for lying then.
Pain crossed his expression, clean and unguarded.
I know. The ledgers did what ledgers always do when powerful men forget paper survives them.
By morning, Vittori's network was already tearing itself apart under evidence. Frozen accounts, frightened accountants, and one deeply motivated attorney who preferred headlines to funerals. Mateo could have buried the truth in concrete and made his uncle disappear into family folklore. Instead, he handed over enough to destroy the machinery without burning everyone under it alive. He said later it was strategy. Luca said later it was me.
Lucy said later both men sounded annoyingly emotional. Nocturne terminated my contract before noon. Mateo bought the parent company by dinner and burned every file connected to Anchor 9 before midnight. When he told me that, I stared at him across the terrace of a safe house on the Hudson, where Lucy was inside asleep on a sofa that cost more than our last car. You bought an entire company because you were offended by my employment conditions? He leaned on the railing beside me, black coat unbuttoned, river wind moving through his hair. That is an unromantic way to phrase a rescue. It is an accurate one. You're difficult in daylight too. I like continuity. For the first time in days.
His smile reached his eyes. It changed him more than any confession had.
Not softer, exactly truer. Below us, the river carried the city lights in broken gold. Behind us, Lucy coughed once in her sleep and rolled over.
The world, for one impossible minute, was not demanding blood, rent, or disappearance. Mateo looked out at the water.
I called Nocturne because it was the only place I could hear myself think without somebody trying to profit from the answer. I folded my arms against the cold. And did it work? He turned toward me slowly. Until I heard you. I thought loneliness was simply the tax power charges that landed somewhere under my ribs before I could stop it. And now?
I asked. Now I think some of us were only ever speaking into the wrong dark. I looked away first because wanting things has always felt more dangerous to me than running.
That was almost beautiful. It was beautiful. It was self-aware enough to become embarrassing. His laugh was quiet.
Real and tired in the way that made me want to protect it. He stepped closer, but not close enough to corner me. He had learned that, or maybe he had remembered I was never safest with men who closed distance faster than I could consent to it.
I don't know what to call this, I admitted. Neither do I. That is not comforting. No, he said. But it's honest. I thought of the first night, the rain, the line.
The man who had asked whether mercy was weakness because he had no other room left in which to be uncertain. I thought of the girl I used to be, watching marshals close a car door on the last version of my name. I thought of Lucy sleeping inside without a suitcase packed under the bed for the first time in years. Then I looked at Mateo.
At the man whose voice I had known before I knew the angle of his mouth or the exact shade of his eyes when he was hurting.
And I said the only thing that felt true enough to risk. You should know. I said.
I still don't fully trust men who can make problems disappear. His expression changed.
Not offended. Just attentive. Good, he said. I'm trying to become the kind who make the right ones disappear.
It was such an absurdly decent answer that I did the one thing I had not planned to do. I touched his face. He went very still, not with dominance.
With reverence so immediate it nearly undid me.
I fell for a voice, he said, almost to himself.
No, I whispered.
You fell for someone who argued with you when it was safer not to. His hand rose to my wrist. Not holding, only asking, I turned my palm and gave him the permission he was too careful to steal.
He exhaled like that small mercy cost him something.
When he kissed me, it was not like violence finding a prettier mask. It was restraint finally trusting itself enough to be tender.
It was a man who knew exactly how much damage hands can do and chose, with visible effort, not to let want become hunger. I kissed him back because I wanted to, because the city had taken enough choices from me. And because for once, love did not feel like surrender. It felt like recognition. Months later, 111 still matters to me.
Not because a private line opens in a glass booth high above Manhattan.
Not because I wear a headset and wait for dangerous men to confess through encrypted static. That life ended the night the bells told the truth. Now 111 is quieter. It is Lucy down the hall practicing violin badly and getting better anyway. It is a kitchen with real dishes that match because I chose them, not because they came furnished. It is Mateo reaching across the dark when sleep leaves him and finding my hand before he fully wakes. As if his body learned before his pride that not every silence has to be survived alone. Sometimes he still carries the old shadows. Sometimes I still check locks twice. Love did not erase the names we came from.
It simply gave us somewhere gentler to set them down. A few nights ago, his phone alarm chimed softly at 1:11.
I opened my eyes and found him looking at me with that familiar, impossible mixture of danger and gratitude that still feels too big for one face.
What?
I murmured. He brushed his thumb over my knuckles. Say hello, I smiled in the dark, remembering rain on glass, the first call. Call? The man who thought mercy might be weakness because no one had ever taught him it could be strength. So I touched his mouth with my fingertips and said, hello.
Il Corvo. His eyes closed for one brief second. Like the sound still reached some wounded place inside him no one else was allowed to find. Hello, Vesper, he said. He had fallen for my voice before he knew my name.
Then my secret shattered the lie his life was built on. And in the end, that was what changed everything. Not that the lonely mafia boss heard a woman in the dark and wanted her.
It was that when he finally learned who I was, he chose the truth over the inheritance that had made him feared, and I chose him back.